With Training Day 3 being announced with a full track list out for people to take a look at, as well as talks of actually getting new music videos for old tracks from Training Day 1 and Training Day 2, I think this is the best time for me to start my series, Throwback Thursdays, looking at UK classic albums and projects. To start off, Pot of Paper, Training Day.
You should go now. Run. No.
So, in terms of the series itself, Throwback Thursdays, it's going to be each Thursday, every week, we're going to go through one album that is considered a UK classic as an album or a project. Or even just albums that are kind of forgotten gems that where maybe didn't quite have a big impact at the time, but in retrospect did a lot and really accomplished quite a lot. Or just albums that actually were doing a lot at the time, maybe weren't quite considered classics, but were big moments in the careers of these artists and are well known within those genres that they belong to in that respect. And the criteria is going to be they have to be an album or a project, and it has to be at least 5 years old. In this sort of series, you're probably going to see more of albums that I would consider in my A tier, which is basically timeless and legendary projects. And it's also going to give an idea of some albums that I just think weren't necessarily legendary in terms of the impact they had on that generation or in that genre, but were just unsung gems that came around from different artists and were a huge part of their careers at that time. If you like the sound of this series, like and subscribe for more episodes of Throwback Thursdays, where I go into UK classic albums and projects in the future. The next one is actually going to be original pirate material from the streets, seeing as he just released his most recent album, so I think that's going to be a good one to look into as well. Like and subscribe if that sounds good. So to move on to the project itself, it's entitled Training Day. So that's based upon the idea of the film with Denzel Washington, Training Day. But I feel like in the kind of world that is Training Day, the kind of gritty kind of underground street culture that Training Day is based in. So obviously you've got your main characters, which is Denzel, which is kind of the enigmatic kind of corrupt cop, and then you've got like the kind of green rookie that has very much in touch with his morality and kind of struggling with what kind of police officer he wants to be. And then there's the actual environment of kind of the slums or the ghetto that they are in charge of policing and interact with that community. Potter comes from the standpoint of being the drug dealer or the trapper within that community. And you notice that with the actual movie itself, it's very gritty, it's very dark. It's not the kind of thing where usually a lot of kind of cop versus drug dealer or cop versus criminal kingpin in these movies. One of them is glorified as the hero, but Pot of Paper, for him, in terms of his interaction of how he uses the film as an influence, there is no hero. Everything is kind of nihilistic, pessimistic, and in terms of the pain that he wants to kind of show that he experiences, he very much is very plain about how this is, and he's very graphic about how he depicts things. And even then, his storytelling of some of the events that happen within his life are quite graphic and well painted. And it kind of reminds me of Kalashnikov in a way. When it comes to kind of struggle rap and road rap within the UK, Pot of Paper has always been a huge staple of the genre, and I feel like there's very few artists in the UK that ever really did that style of rap better than he did. I feel like his sound very much came from kind of New York boom bap beats, because I feel like we were kind of at a time where UK rap didn't really have its own sound in that sense, and those were kind of the beats that people tend to pick. For example, there was the Hometown remix, a UK rap remix of that came out, and everyone and their mum was spitting on that. And I do remember when that came out, and it really did feel more like a New York rap sound than it did kind of a UK sound, even though it had a sample from a UK R&B artist being Adele. I think I just want to get my negatives out of the way in terms of what I thought of the project and what I've always thought of the project. I didn't really like when he kind of hops in these kind of more modern type beats, and the beats that in UK rap were kind of popping up around that time. So the intro and I Ain't Justin Bieber, those are two beats that I don't really like. I don't really think Potter really gets to do what he does best on those beats, and the kind of emotions that he usually conveys across to you isn't really done very well when he's on both of those beats. But his pen is just as sharp as ever, as we'll kind of pick out and move on to later on. Hustlin' has always been one of my favorites on this one because there's just so many punchlines on this that it just has you screwing your face up for the entire thing. I feel like this is where it really shows how great his pen game is and was. Lines like "rocket like Hendrix" and my personal favorite, "I don't pick up food, I deadlift," that bar just sent me to a whole different planet. Like, what the fuck? The song "No Shame" is kind of referring back to, in terms of the strengths of the song, what I was talking about, where he's very good at conveying emotion to you. In this one, I feel like it's very retrospective about how he feels about his life and his environment as a trapper and how that makes him feel about himself. It's very self-conscious. He very much conveys loneliness and despair and just general pain and sadness and sorrow with his life. Despite how comforting at times the money of the trap lifestyle may be, these emotions are still very much there, and he doesn't shy away from them. And he also does a really good job of kind of pushing them into you, and you do kind of feel it in you whilst listening to it as well. And that's one thing Potter has always been very good at, and why I think he's kind of in a class of his own when it comes to struggle rap and road rap. I can pretty confidently say that the overall fan favorite in terms of the most listened to song on this tape, and the song that I think fans think is the best, is Purple Rain, and I think it's pretty easy to see why when you take a little bit of a deeper dive into it. The flow switches that Potter comes up with are actually nuts. I do really like the tone of the instrumental because it's very stripped back, it's not very in your face, and it kind of helps him convey the emotions of kind of pain and sorrow in a way that he is telling you a story at times, a kind of a recollection of events that are happening within this lifestyle that he lives, and it all comes together really nicely. And I think this is why people love Purple Rain so much, because I think this is the song that gets you in your feelings the most. It's just so sincere how he talks about the trap life, and in a way it's kind of refreshing to see someone who's quite honest with the life that they live, and not just picking out the best parts and blowing that up and making it look really great, but also really showing the complex emotions that come along with it, and actually giving you graphic details of what he experiences without just trying to shock you all the time. And he finds a different way of being graphic rather than just using shock tactics, gore and expletives, I guess. I think another track on this that we cannot possibly forget is the outro track with Mover, and simply because Potter and Mover have always been a really good tag team, even though they haven't linked up crazy amounts of times over the years, but every time they have, it's always been memorable. Specifically because Mover, I would argue Mover in terms of UK rap artists, is one of the best artists to ever lose their career to jail. And it's one of those what if moments. What could Mover have been if he didn't end up in jail? Because a tape that one day I may as well do a review on is the tape that Mover released just before or just after he was in jail. I really want to give a big shout out to the both of them for how they tackled this beat with the kind of blues and disco vibes on it, and kind of the bass line itself. It's quite tricky to rap on, and if you put this in front of your average rapper, or pretty much quite a lot of different rappers, they're going to struggle a bit. But in terms of the flows that Mover and Potter come up with, they just both nail it, and it just seems to be so effortless between the two of them. But this beat to rap on isn't easy at all. There's also the line, "If you doubt man, whip spin around like an album," obviously because albums are on CDs and the CD spins in the tray. So I do think like it's bars like that just also shows Mover's talent as a lyricist as well, and he was good with that sort of thing as well, which is why I kind of also said was talking about how he is such a great talent that was basically ruined by prison, and it's a big what if as to how great Mover could have been. So I want to go into my personal favorites from this tape. One of my personal favorites is A Conversation with a Fiend. I love that one. I think it's a really genius idea. It's literally a conversation with a fiend put in a rap song, and it's talking about the story of what was happening with one of his basically clients as a trapper, and what this fiend wanted, and how stressful it was, and literally how annoying the job is. It's weird because it's like if someone was to just have like a little mini rap and a little bitch fit and a little moan about how much they hate their job at Morrison's, you wouldn't be able to make it that interesting. But that's kind of what this feels like. It's almost like it's just a regular job at the office, and he's come home from a stressful day and he just wants to tell you how shit his day's been. White Bastard is my favourite beat on the tape, yet again with one of the vocal samples, but I really do like that kind of drum kit that they've used because it just feels very authentic, and I feel like it kind of fits in a bit more on the lo-fi end of things. But I know like lo-fi wasn't really a thing quite in the way it is now, but I do feel like in terms of kind of that New York rap sound, I feel like it is there. And I feel like, yeah, again, kind of the Adele Hometown, that is a good reference track to kind of look at this sort of style. And I really do like how it comes together, and especially on this one, I think it does it the best. In terms of like a quotable line that I love from this one, R.I.P. I'll Rita Man's auras, like that one, first time I heard it, I remember just going absolutely fucking apeshit. The last of my favourites is probably going to be Poor Man's rap, because I think he kind of articulates the pain and the despair that he kind of feels within the life that he lives the best, and conveys that to you in the kind of best way possible, lyrically, and how he kind of flows on the instrumental and all of those things put together. They were saying, thinking about all the pillows that my head spin, all of this kind of stuff like that, that whole segment just after that line, I think that's kind of a good example of kind of how he just looks at his life and just not necessarily self-pity, but kind of reflects on the struggles that he's faced, but articulates it to you in a point where it's not to feel sorry for him, it's more to understand him. And I feel like this is why this song really appeals to me the most. He displays basically his pain as anger and channels that into how he raps, and the kind of how he exaggerates certain words at the end of lines to make it feel more intense and aggressive. He does that really well. I don't know if that's necessarily a conscious thing or that's just how he felt and that just came into how he was rapping. But either way, it works really well because it's one of my favorites on the tape. So overall, I'm going to give this an A. I think in terms of how road rap and struggle rap in the UK kind of progressed before and after him, I think this was a huge landmark in what it then did later on. And I feel like this is a tape that people will refer back to and still do refer back to when they talk about these kind of albums, the kind of Scrapses, the Nines and the Gigs of the world. This is one that people will constantly refer back to and still do, and it's still a fan favourite if you are interested in that sort of music at all. It's really good in terms of lyrical content, because lyrically his pen is just as sharp as ever, and there's so many different lines you can pick out, and how he articulates himself and the emotions he wants to convey to you. It's so well done, and for the most part the instrumentals he picks, he gets the tone across really well. When he wants to be aggro and in your face, he can be. When he wants to be a bit more sincere about how he's feeling, he can also do that as well. When he wants to tell you a story of the experiences he had, he can also do that as well. So I just feel like, as well as that, wrapped up with the kind of concept of the project and how dark and gritty the tone is across the entire thing, and almost how it's kind of laced with despair, it just all comes together really well as a